Hey, before we dive into this week's episode, if you've been enjoying the show, I'd love your support. Take just 10 seconds to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps others discover the wisdom and inspiration that I share on the Pivot to Balance podcast. Let's build a community of balance seekers together. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to share the love. Now let's dive into the episode. Hello and welcome to the Pivot to Balance podcast. I'm your host, AK, and I hope you're doing well. In a world that pulls us in a million different directions and with a billion distractions, finding balance can feel like an ambiguous quest. Join me on this podcast as I try to navigate life's twists and turns with mindfulness, purpose, and grace. In each episode, we will dive into topics like self-care, personal growth, mindset shifts by sharing practical insights, stories, and maybe even interviews. Get ready to pivot, to recalibrate, and find your balance. Follow the Pivot to Balance podcast, and I will see you on the other side. Welcome back to this week's episode. In this week's episode, I want to talk about something we all struggle with at some point, which is motivation. You sometimes set a goal, you're very motivated, you start off really strong, and then somewhere along the way, the drive kind of just fades away. You were excited, you wanted it, but suddenly it's I would rather just watch a movie and then get to it. You start procrastinating. You tell yourself, I'm just going to sleep early tonight so that I can wake up really early in the morning and do this. And then you wake up late and then you're like, you know what? Since I woke up late, I'm just going to ignore this entire day and start at 6 p.m. I'm very curious what actually drives us, why we feel so unstoppable in some moments and completely stuck in others. And I will tell you why I'm making this episode today. So today I went to an event and I had been looking forward to this event for I would say 2 months or 1 month at this point. And I chased for tickets. I emailed them even before the tickets went live. I was like, hey, when am I going to be able to get the tickets? Did you guys already sell out? What's going on? That's how much I wanted to go to this event. I was so motivated. And I was preparing for the event. I got prepared. I got ready. I was so put together. I was just so motivated. I knew who I wanted to talk to, what conversations I wanted to have. Anybody that I wanted to talk there, I made sure that, I looked them up, researched them, connected, had questions prepared, everything. All good, right? I got on the cab and I went to that place. The cab driver dropped me off, and I don't know if this is something that everybody does, but I didn't actually check if I was being dropped off at the right location because I didn't know what this location looked like, right? I did check Google Maps. I did check the 360 view, and it looked like that place when I got dropped off. I had my hair open, I was wearing heels, and I looked around and I couldn't find any sign of this place that I was supposed to go to. And this is not an area that I'm very familiar with. So I was like, okay, where am I? And I pulled up Google Maps to find out where I was. And then I was using Lyft app. So Lyft app showed me how to get to that place, and it was 5-minute car ride from there. I was like, I chose the right place. Why did I get dropped off here? And I was so pissed off because it was so windy and my hair was all over the place. All of the stuff that I'd done to my hair was just ruined. I had to walk in heels. Have you been to Boston? Walking in heels it's not very common. I was I had to walk in heels. I am just so frustrated. I was so prepared. And I knew the time that I selected, I knew I would be there right when I wanted to be there. And now I'm going to be late by 5 minutes. And I didn't want to make that kind of an impression. I was just everything was running in my head. And I told myself, you know what? I'm not going to go to this event. I'm not going to, because it's just so frustrating. Whatever I wanted to happen didn't happen. So I'm just not going to go. I'm going to book another cab and I'm going to go home and I'm going to watch all about the things that I missed out on later that day or the next day. Then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to call a friend and tell them that I'm going to try and find this location. Because Lyft app was showing me to get to that place. It's 5-minute car ride. Google Maps was telling me I could walk there in 3 minutes. So I was I don't know which one of this is true. I don't know where this place is. I called my friend and I said, listen, I want to rant. And if you're, in the mood to listen, I would love for you to listen. And then I was on call with my friend. But because I was on call with my friend and I wasn't getting tensed, I walked into a nearby restaurant and I asked them hey, where's this place? And they told me it's right down the street. I still had to walk in heels right down the street, but I was like, okay, you know what? At least I know my plan of action. I'm just going to go. I'm going to walk and go and let me see how it goes. I was talking to my friend, completely frustrated, still complaining. But my friend was also talking about something else that was going on in my friend's life. But my friend was also talking about other stuff with me. So I walked down to that place, and by the time I got there, I was still frustrated, still nervous, still anxious and everything. But I got to that place, which is when I started thinking I was so motivated to go to this event, but just because one thing didn't go the way I wanted it to, I was ready to completely give up and just go home. So today, we're breaking down the neuroscience of motivation. What's actually happening in your brain? The difference between intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. Why the way you set your goals actually matter. How to train your brain to stay motivated even when you don't feel like it. And I want to talk about the myth of willpower and what actually works instead. Because let's be real, if motivation was just about, quote unquote, wanting it badly enough, we would all be Olympic athletes by now and even like best-selling authors by now. But yeah, that's not how it works. So let's start off with your brain. At the core of motivation is dopamine, the neurotransmitter that makes you anticipate rewards. I said anticipate, not get. Because neuroscientists have found that dopamine isn't just a pleasure chemical, it's actually the motivation chemical. It's what pushes you to take action, not just what makes you feel good after. So it's like even before you take the action and the result that you get for it, it's like before you even take it, how you feel also matters. It pushes you to take that action. Dr. Andrew Huberman, a neuroscientist at Stanford, explains that dopamine spikes in anticipation of a reward, not actually when you receive it. So that's why when starting a goal, it's often exciting, but as soon as the reward feels far away, in my case, the place that I wanted to get to seemed a little far away, like a 5-minute walk with my hair flying everywhere and heels, my dopamine levels dropped. So your dopamine levels will drop and suddenly we just don't feel it anymore. And that's why you might feel like I'm unmotivated after the first few days in a new project. You might get stuck in I'll start tomorrow kind of a cycle. You'll feel more excited thinking about success than actually working toward it. And because of what happened to me today, I was like, let me look this up. Like, I want to know. And it gets interesting here because dopamine is trainable. Scientists found that how you frame your goal affects dopamine level. If you tell yourself, I'll feel amazing when I finish this book, your brain registers the reward as far away. Naturally, motivation drops. But if you say, I'm excited to write today because I'm learning and growing, dopamine stays steady. Because now the reward isn't just at the end, it's in the process. And that shift is actually huge, right? Think about it. If I had gotten ready thinking, wow, I like getting ready. Wow, I like walking. Wow, I might not have things go the way that I wanted it to. Wow, I might be late, but that's okay. I can still walk. I get like a 5-minute walk in for the day. But no, my focus was I need to get there at this point so that I am earlier than everybody, so that I get to meet people before anyone else does, so that no, that's what ruined my motivation because what I wanted to do was be there on time, like 10 minutes before. I wanted to be all put together. And then that completely ruined the entire point of me actually going there. And that's why my motivation dropped.
Hey, if you listen to this podcast, I think you will also love my newsletter, Elevator Gazette. I talk a lot about elevating your professional and your personal lives. Make sure to subscribe to my newsletter. Go to anushakanan.com/email list, and I'm sure you will love it. Join everyone who is like-minded. And now let's get into the episode.
So that's where the two big types of motivation comes in. Because understanding which one you rely on can completely literally change the game. Which brings me to intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation and why it matters. Intrinsic motivation is when you do something because you genuinely enjoy it or find it meaningful. Extrinsic motivation is when you do something for an external reward, like money, praise, validation. And the thing is, both are valid, right? In my case, I wanted to go to the event because I wanted to get something out of it. Like, I genuinely love being around marketers. I genuinely love that community. I genuinely love the people that I knew I was going to meet there. But there was also extrinsic motivation in play, like I had to show up on time, how I dress up is important, what time I show up was important, what people think about me is important. But research shows that extrinsic motivation fades faster because once you get the reward, the drive disappears. So in my case, my extrinsic was probably a little bit higher than my intrinsic, right? Psychologist Edward Deci ran a famous study on this. He paid one group of people to solve puzzles and let another group solve them just for fun, right? So one is getting paid, one is just having fun. When he removed the payment later, the first group stopped solving puzzles altogether. And the second group, who was only doing it for fun, kept going. If you think about it, why? Why did the first group that was getting paid, when money got taken away from them, why did they lose, that motivation? But the other group just kept solving. Because money had replaced their natural curiosity. They had started doing it for the reward, not for the joy of figuring things out. Do you see the difference? If you rely on external rewards, you'll always need bigger ones to stay motivated. But if you focus on internal rewards like growth, curiosity, mastery, motivation tends to last longer. So ask yourself, what's my real reason for wanting this goal? Any goal that you have, if you have even one extrinsic motivation tied to it, I'm not saying it's wrong. Like I said, both are important, both are valid, but just weigh which one is more. If it's just about proving something to others, motivation might not last. But if it's about doing something because you love it, or at least you love who you are becoming, it's more sustainable. Now, let's get into the real problem. What do you do when that motivation disappears? In my case, it did disappear, right? It always does disappear. So let's talk about that. First of all, create dopamine loops. Remember how dopamine spikes in anticipation, not just in the outcome? Use that to your advantage. Instead of waiting for the final reward, I'll be happy when I finish this project, break your goal into small wins, which is why people always talk about small wins. Set up tiny rewards for yourself, like celebrating every chapter you write or every workout you complete. Track your progress visually. I used to do this when I was back in India. I had this goal that before I moved to the US, I wanted to go to the gym every single day. So I would have an entire whiteboard marked, I've created this calendar on my whiteboard and I had green and red markers. Anytime I missed a gym, the red marker would go there. My entire goal was the red marker shouldn't be used. My red marker will not be used. I'll only use the green one. So visual trackers actually really help. Habit trackers, progress bars, crossing off days on a calendar can actually help trigger small dopamine hits. Thirdly, focus on identity shifts. Instead of saying, I need to finish this, say I'm the kind of person who follows through. That's exactly what I actually told myself internally. I was if I don't make it to something that I actually paid for this event. I wanted to be there. I knew what I wanted to do. And I actually told these people hey, I'm looking forward to meeting you there. And if I don't show up, they're going to know that. And I don't want to be that kind of a person. So create dopamine loops. Number 2, rethink motivation altogether. Just completely. Because the biggest myth about motivation, that you need it to take action. You don't need motivation. Dr. Mel Robbins talks about the 5-second rule, which basically says that motivation is unreliable. It's not at all reliable. You just need to take action before your brain talks you out of it. Every single morning, your brain is going to try and talk you out of getting up. But no, you're just going to get up and then you can be oh my God, there's nothing to talk me out of because I'm already up. Instead of waiting to feel motivated, count down from 5 and just start. Your brain follows movement, not the other way around. Don't wait to feel like going to the gym. Just put on your shoes, because once you start, momentum kicks in. Even if you don't, you'll still identify as a person who went to the gym. How they talk about in Atomic Habits, that book by James Clear. Once you start going to the gym every single day, you might have days when you go to the gym and you don't even work out because you're physically tired. And that's okay, but you still made it to the gym. You still picked up a dumbbell. You still walked on the treadmill, something. Number 3, change your relationship with failure. Motivation dies when we feel like we're failing. Because the reality is our brain learns more from mistakes than they do from successes. Studies show that when we fail, our neurons fire more, meaning the brain actually adjusts and rewires itself because you're doing something. It creates this fight or flight reaction in your brain, right? So instead of thinking, I failed, so I should stop, shift to something this is my brain getting stronger. Every mistake is data. This is a skill I'm learning, not a sign that I should quit. Think about this. Michael Jordan got cut from his high school basketball team. J.K. Rowling was rejected 12 times. The difference is they didn't expect motivation to carry them. They built systems to keep going. I think one of the biggest things for me when I look at really successful people is people look at that success, but then they've failed so many times. They've literally been in positions where they felt wow, I'm not worth it. I might not be able to do this. They would have definitely had these kind of thought processes inside them, but they didn't let that stop them. So Let's sum this up. Motivation isn't about wanting something badly. It's about how you train your brain to anticipate rewards. External rewards fade, but internal motivation lasts longer. So don't wait to feel motivated. Act first and motivation will follow. Reframe failure as learning. Your brain is literally rewiring itself every single time you struggle. So my challenge to you is stop waiting for motivation to strike. Ask yourself, what small action can I take today to create momentum? Yeah, that was my lesson from today's event. If this episode made you think, send it to someone you think would love this, would benefit from it. And if you haven't yet, hit follow, rate and review the podcast. It's how this podcast grows. I was actually watching one of my old videos where I'm talking about, I want to create the Pivot to Balance podcast and how excited I was about creating this podcast. I would love for you to support it if you felt like it was useful for you. So yeah, until next time, stay curious, take action, and keep showing up. You've got this. Now go grab a cup of lemon water and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.